All right, great. Good morning. My name is Greg Mitchell. I'm the founder and CEO of IRF Secretariat. IRF stands for International Religious Freedom, and we're one of the conveners. So welcome. And we do have some people online as well. So we're going to be hybrid, in person and online. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to how FoRB, which stands for Freedom of Religion or Belief, can help prevent the misuse of religion and build social cohesion and resilience. So this is our civil society program in connection with the 2024 International Ministerial Conference on Freedom of Religion or Belief, which is tomorrow being hosted by the German government. So we're very happy to be convening this civil society program the day before. We have a full program today, and I just wanted to first start by thanking the three conveners. We have IRF Secretariat, we have Templeton Religion Trust, and we have Love Your Neighbor Community. So thank you to the conveners for making this possible. Also, we have co-sponsors that I need to thank, because without the conveners and the co-sponsors, we wouldn't be here today. So I want to thank Mercury One, I want to thank Global Peace Foundation, Bellwether International, Global Christian Relief, the European Office of the Church of Scientology for Public Affairs and Human Rights, and the Alliance of Virtue. So thank you to all the conveners and co-sponsors for making this possible. We're excited, and thank you all for being here and agreeing to participate in this program. So I'd like to start, before I introduce the conveners, I want to start by just defining some of the key concepts, including the key words in the title. So I'm going to start, Kaylee, if you're ready, with, there's our next one. So FoRB, just the key points is this is Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It's freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. We'll go to the next slide. I'm just going to run through these pretty quick. Oh, I had bolded some key points in these definitions that didn't come through. But build, I wanted to highlight just some of the key words in these. But it's uniting materials by gradual means into a composite whole, to develop according to a systematic plan, by a definite process. I just want to highlight the keys. Next, where's social? Social cohesion? We're missing social. All right, let's go back to social. There were some key words in social that were basically built on cooperation as well. Cohesion, the act or state of sticking together tightly. Union between similar parts. Next. And then resilience, ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Next. Social cohesion, is that not in there? Okay, let's go back. Another, social cohesion is basically the glue that binds society together. The glue that binds. That's what we're looking. That's what you're going to learn about today. Is that's what we're working to achieve, is the glue that binds, in society. Cooperative. A couple other key words you're going to hear later in the program today. Cooperative engagement. So the first word, cooperative, willingness and ability to work with others, obviously marked by cooperation. But look at being helpful, common effort, common benefit. Next. This is what my favorite, engagement. To interlock with, mesh. The fabric of a net, to fit or work together properly, to come together and interlock. So next, cooperative engagement. If you put those two together, we're engaging people of all faiths and beliefs, respecting the human dignity of each individual, including those of other faiths and beliefs, and pulling together and interlocking to work with each other and help each other. And it's really building social fabric, which is what we need in the times we're living through today. Cooperative engagement is taking responsibility for each other, standing up for each other, protecting each other's liberty of conscience. Next. And taking responsibility for your community, state, nation, and the world. Engaging governments cooperatively and constructively in multi-faith fashion. And working with governments to improve public policy, solve social problems, and secure fundamental rights. Next. And this is the final slide, I think. This is what we're building and strengthening: social cohesion and resilience, but also good citizenship and governance, stability and security, which is a theme here today also, FoRB and security, economic development and growth, and in the end, peace and prosperity. So I just wanted to run through those key definitions, those key points, because I think that was very helpful. And that's what we're here to do, basically. That's the work that you're going to learn about today. Collaborative work, building all those social, economic, and cultural benefits. So with that, I'm going to introduce we have 3 remarks from the leaders of 3 conveners. First, I'm going to bring up Chris Stewart, who's the Chief Grants Officer for Templeton Religion Trust. As I said yesterday, Chris and Templeton have been the primary funders, and they've poured millions of dollars already into, through its Covenantal Pluralism Initiative, poured millions and millions of dollars over the last 10 years into this collaborative work to build religious freedom from the ground up. So please welcome Chris Stewart.
Thank you, Greg. It's an honor to co-convene this civil society program with the International Religious Freedom Secretariat and the Love Your Neighbor community. To begin, I want to invite you to join me in a thought experiment. What if everything that any one of us, or even all of us put together, knew about God, the object of the world's religions, amounted to less than 1% of what can be learned about spiritual reality? Whether or not 99% of spiritual reality remains to be discovered, or whether that fact is even something we're in a position to establish, is not really the point. It's a thought experiment proposed by the founder of the Templeton Philanthropies, Sir John Templeton, as a way to describe the human condition when it comes to religious belief. The question is this: how would this realization make us feel? What would be our response? It does not mean that we should be any less confident in our beliefs about God or our non-beliefs about God, but it might make us more humble about how little we know about spiritual reality and more eager to learn from others. It might make us a bit more enthusiastic and diligent in trying to discover more, to supplement the wisdom of our own traditions by listening to the wisdom of others, and a bit more open to what we can learn from the ideas and practices of other traditions, including even the methods and deliverances of the sciences. Sir John called this the humble approach, which at its best reflects the humility and eagerness to engage others across our differences that remains the key to tapping the enormous potential for good made possible not only by understanding what we have in common, but also by appreciating our differences, transforming them from being a part of the problem to being an essential part of the solution to the many challenges we face. Thank you for taking the time to join our conversations over the next couple of days.
And I'm going to announce the next 2 so they can just come up one after the other. But Nadine Maenza, President of IRF Secretariat, former chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, so a great champion.
Thank you so much. Good morning. It's wonderful to be together. It's really a pleasure to co-convene this event with Templeton Religion Trust and Love Your Neighbor community. And as you know, I joined IRF Secretariat after serving as chair at the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Was honored to join Greg Mitchell and this amazing team we have here working to build religious freedom. And as Chris Stewart just reflected, humility and eagerness to engage across our differences is the key to building religious freedom. We don't become less religious to engage with one another. Instead, we actually bring our deepest held religious beliefs to the table. And then we accept the human dignity of the person next to us with different religious beliefs. And then we work together to further religious freedom for all. This engagement builds social cohesion and resilience that is necessary for long-term peace, stability, and ultimately prosperity. So for this event, we were intentional in bringing majority world voices into the conversation about how building religious freedom or belief is necessary to counter extremism. I'm excited for you to hear from, in a little bit today, the mayor of Hamdaniya, or Carrasco, in the Nineveh Plains, and an official from northeast Syria, who have built inclusive societies despite the almost unbelievable threats they face. We will also hear from government officials and religious and civil society leaders doing remarkable work in places like Iraq, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Ghana, and others, all working in different environments to create inclusive societies where all religious communities can live and work together peacefully. We embrace both cooperative engagement, which is what you'll be hearing about today, and traditional advocacy, which is the focus of the Religious Freedom Roundtable that a lot of you were able to attend yesterday. While traditional advocacy is necessary, it is not sufficient to turn the tide of declining religious freedom conditions globally. We need to work in cooperative engagement with governments, civil society, and religious communities on the ground to have the biggest impact possible. That is how we are going to stem the tide of rising religious persecution globally. This summer, I was able to attend a Lamina Institute's cross-cultural religious literacy training and a conference in Indonesia, where Muslim and Christian teachers learn what their religion teaches them about engaging with one another, and then also about each other's religions. Romat, who runs a madrasa in Indonesia, and Jonathan, who runs a Christian school, ended up becoming good friends during this training and decided to organize a school exchange and visit. In December, the Christian school visited the madrasa boarding house, and the exchange exceeded their imaginations, with the girls quickly becoming friends and sharing phone numbers. The Muslim teacher said it was like the Berlin Wall falling, because the madrasa was a very private, quiet, closed place. The madrasa then visited the Christian school, leading to joy and fun throughout the school. The students now engage regularly and even play basketball together. These stories can be duplicated thousands of times, and it shows the real impact both on individual lives but also on society as a whole. Today, you will also hear from experts doing some of the best work on the ground in cooperative engagement, like Wade Kusack, who is going to speak next from Love Your Neighbor community. He's doing transformational work in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Georgia. Earlier this year, I was honored to join Wade and Mohammed El-Sanusi, who I believe is here, in a delegation led by Dr. Chris Seiple to independently assess religious freedom conditions in Uzbekistan at the invitation of the government, so we could understand better the security situation in the context of freedom of religion or belief. There is simply no other country other than Uzbekistan that I have seen have the kind of improvements they have in the last decade, so it's worth doing a deeper dive to understand what's happening there. So as you will see when you hear from these majority world voices and these experts on the ground, each country has its own complexities with very unique political environments, and of course the geopolitical landscape impacts all of this. Yet there are some lessons we can learn from those doing this work and from those that are living there doing the work. And I'm looking forward to talking later at our open mic where we can all have a conversation, and of course during our summary discussion. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you and talking with all of you later, and thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Nadine. And then Wade Kusack is the founder and CEO of Love Your Neighbor community. Wade.
Good evening, dear guests of our conference, our event. I'm Wade Kusack, founder and CEO of Love Your Neighbor community, US-based NGO that works on building religious freedom, primarily in a post-Soviet space. It's an honor and pleasure to co-convene this event with my colleagues who spoke here before me. And I'm deeply grateful to Templeton Religion Trust for defining and funding the humbled approach, and the IRF Secretariat for their support of work in cooperative engagement with governments, civil society, and religious communities on the ground to have the biggest impact possible. Although these values that were declared by my friends and partners were not what I believed and practiced some time ago. I used to believe that name, shame, and blame was the only way to advance religious freedom and achieve justice for those who were persecuted for their faith. I not only believed that, but I energetically acted upon my beliefs by organizing rallies, pickets, public campaigns, engaging members of the US Congress and the US State Department with letters and petitions to sanction the governments suppressing religious freedom. That's what I did. As time passed, I realized that while we achieved some progress, some success, the overall situation often worsened for the communities we were advocating for. Our campaigns raised awareness and even helped free few religious leaders, but they strained relationships with the governments and did not create lasting solutions. When I was asked what was my strategy for ensuring that these violations would not be repeated, I had no answer. And that's when I recognized the need for a new approach that goes beyond name, shame, and blame and focus on sustainable change. This realization led me to found Love Your Neighbor community, where we work to build religious freedom through cooperative engagement, not confrontation. Today, we focus on 3 core areas to drive our mission forward. First, we aim for greater thought leadership and original research. We can develop more effective solutions by deepening our understanding of religious life's dynamics and the multidimensional challenges countries face. This research is not just academic. It's meant to form practical strategies to support the sound development of the governments is already doing and offer additional ideas and opportunities based on the world-based best practices. Our trip to Uzbekistan in January, which Nadine just mentioned, effectively demonstrated this approach. As a result of that trip, a wide range of projects and trainings were initiated aimed at strengthening religious freedom and social cohesion, as well as addressing threats of radicalization. And we are now on the verge of implementing them. Second, we are committed to building a stronger community of collaborative practices. No single organization or entity can address these issues alone. That's why we create an expanding coalition of international partners and work with governments, civil societies, and religious leaders of all faith on the ground to create partnerships that foster trust and shared responsibility. Today you will have an opportunity to hear from the government and religious community leaders from some of the Eurasia countries about their engagement in collaborative practices right after the coffee break. And finally, we aim to cultivate an emerging culture of philanthropy, both public and private. To sustain long-term impact, we need to engage donors and stakeholders who believe in the power of cooperative engagement and are willing to invest in this approach. Some countries, for example, like Uzbekistan, demonstrate their interest in investing in our mutual programs by paying in-country cost for most of the activities our partnership convey there. I have come to understanding that making real progress in advancing religious freedom requires humility, cooperation, and strategic partnership. By working together and taking a thoughtful, research-driven approach, we can create lasting change and build communities where differences become a part of the solution, as we heard from Chris Stewart today. This can help drive our societies to witness and celebrate many Berlin Walls falling across the globe, including our country. Because what we practice overseas, in Central Asia, for example, and when we observe great success in multi-phase, multi-sectoral relationship building, mind change, the stride toward more religious freedom. I'm jealous to bring these practices back to the United States. And because we were inspired by our results in Central Asia, we started the same work in Florida, in Miami, where I live, with Muslims, Christians, other religions, and different sectors of the society, engaging them in thoughtful and deep communication about our social problems and what our communities facing there. So this is a two-way highway. It's not only us going there and invest. We also bringing back the best practices, mutually benefit our society. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Chris, Nadine, and Wade. I'm going to call up the next set of speakers now. Ambassador Robert Rehak, Fernanda San Martin Carrasco, MP Jose Ramos, MP Godfred Seidu Jasaw, Professor John Azumah, Professor Uriel Simonsohn is online with us, and then Sheikh Al-Mahfoud bin Baya. All right, great. So each one of these leaders is going to deliver brief VIP keynote remarks. And we'll start with Ambassador Robert Rehak of the Czech Republic. He's chair of the Article 18 Alliance, which is made up of 43 countries, 43 governments. It's a government-run alliance that focuses on freedom of religion or belief. He's also the Czech ambassador or the special envoy for Holocaust, interfaith dialogue, and freedom of religion. So please welcome Robert Rehak.
Good morning. Sabahul khair. I would like to start with a joke because I'm known that I'm Czech and the Czechs have special sense of humor, not to make it too boring. Do you agree? Yes. Okay. The joke goes a little bit back in time because we are on a historical place, actually. Just a few meters from here, there was the border between the East and West Germany. And the joke goes a little bit back to the time after the collapse of Soviet Union. Yankele went in Moscow to his cafe, and he came there and said, "Please bring me coffee, cigar, and Pravda." Pravda was the communist newspaper, which was very significant, the True, right? And the waiter said, "I'm sorry, I will bring you the coffee, the cigar, but the True hasn't been published since the collapse of Soviet Union." So, okay, he drinks the coffee, has the cigar, and leave. The next week, Yankele comes again and said, "Please bring me the coffee, cigar, and Pravda." So the same waiter is a little bit surprised and says, "Sir, the Pravda, the True, has been not published since the collapse of Soviet Union." So he finishes coffee, leaves. After another week, comes again and orders the same coffee, cigar, and Pravda. And the waiter starts to be already nervous and says, "Sir, you can't hear? I told you already that it hasn't been published since the collapse of the Soviet Union." And he says, "No, I hear well, but the sound so good. It sounds so good." You know, for people of minorities, Christian, Jews, and even some Muslims, in the previous regimes, they had big troubles. And then came a revolution, The Berlin Wall was down, and we hoped that the world changed, okay? That suddenly pravda will be pravda, the true will be the true. But it took not so long time, and again came time that it's full of bending of the true, misusing of the true, misusing of the religion. The situation is very bad right now, also due to the Russian aggression against Ukraine and the misuse of the Russian Orthodox Church of religion that actually became the propaganda tool in order to make influence and not only to back up the narratives of aggression, but also, as we will hear, to influence some local votings like in Moldova and others via the Russian Orthodox Church. Not only that, we have big conflict in the Middle East. We have here distinguished guests from that area. And also there you can see that the religion is misused and tragically misused. The topic of today's session is how FoRB can help to prevent the misuse of religion and how can help to build social cohesion and resilience. In my opinion, the very important thing is that to recognize the trends, to denounce it. If there is a misuse of religion by church, like it happens right now with the Russian Orthodox Church, or by many leaders who are politicians, even in our part of the world, that means Central Europe, they use the language of religion to back up their political goals, and they are misusing, but also to develop inner and external tools. Inner tools, that means we should to increase our own resilience, to recognize it, to learn the critical reading of the news and the truth that is coming to us, but start to educate the others and support each others. In this respect, I would like to thank to our Secretariat, Templeton Trust Foundation and others who supported this event, because it means we are coming together, learn from each other, and to support each other. And in this way, to increase our resilience against the very negative trends that we face right now, like polarization, misuse of religion, and backup aggressions. The topic of those days is also AI, which started to be critically important. It's an excellent tool that we can use to promote FoRB, freedom of religion or belief, but also it's a great danger. And the danger that it is already misused by the authoritarian regimes, and we are very slow even to realize how it is misused, in which scale. And the problem is, in my eyes, that we should try to be one step ahead and develop tools how we can use it in positive sense, and maybe to call the world to include into the all AI system something like human rights values, which will protect minorities, protect concrete people, and support them, not opposite. There are still many people sitting in prison, like Pastor Lorenzo in Cuba, due to his communist regime, and we need to help them. Thank you very much.
Great. Next up, we have Fernanda, San Martin, Carrasco. So Robert runs a global network of governments. Fernanda runs a global network of parliamentarians. So it's the International Panel of Parliamentarians for Freedom of Religion or Belief. She's also a former MP from Bolivia. Fernanda, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the invitation from IRF, Templeton Religion Trust, and Love Your Neighbor community. for opening a space for IPPFoRB to participate in this event. Although we are not stricto sensu a civil society organization. IPPFoRB is the only network of parliamentarians working exclusively on advancing freedom of religion or belief for all, everywhere, and is composed of more than 350 parliamentarians, both sitting and former, from around the world from 95 different countries. We cherish and value diversity as a core value to our work, bringing to the network the voices of MPs from different religious, political, and geographical backgrounds. We provide capacity building to MPs to give them the tools to advocate for freedom of religion or belief, and we help them in their initiatives of advocacy. It's both an honor and a privilege to address you today on an issue that not only defines the core of democratic values, but also speaks to the strength of our societies in an increasingly interconnected yet divided world. FoRB has the potential to serve as both a shield and a compass. A shield that protects against the misuse of religion for political purposes, and a compass that guides us toward building social cohesion and resilience. As its core, FoRB encapsulates the right to believe or not to believe, to express one's faith or worldview openly, and to do so without fear of persecution, discrimination, or violence. It is a universal human right enshrined in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, protecting all individuals regardless of their faith, belief system, or lack thereof. FoRB, however, it's not simply about individual liberty. It's a social good, a virtue that upheld foster mutual respect, understanding, and the peaceful coexistence of diverse groups. It provides a foundation upon which pluralistical societies can flourish. When FoRB is fully realized, it nurtures societies in which people of all faiths and those of none can live together in harmony. But when it's undermined, it opens the door to the religious extremism, sectarism, and the manipulation of religion for political or violent ends. Throughout history, and unfortunately today, we have seen how religion can be manipulated and distorted to justify hatred, exclusion, and violence. The misuse of religion to legitimize persecution, terrorism, or political repression remains a challenge in many parts of the world. Whether it's violent extremism, conflict, or the repression of minority communities, FoRB provides a vital antidote to this misuse. By promoting a legal and cultural framework in which all beliefs are respected, FoRB fosters an environment, and it ensures that individuals cannot impose their beliefs on others through coercion, intimidation, or force. Instead, freedom of religion or belief encourages dialogue, critical thinking, and peaceful coexistence, empowering societies to resist to those who would manipulate religion for harmful purposes. A key reason why society fracture, whether along religious, ethical, or ideological lines, it's the inability to accommodate diversity. In the absence of mutual respect, pluralistic societies risk becoming polarized and unstable. Here again, FoRB plays an essential role. It's a cornerstone of inclusive, diverse societies where different identities are not merely tolerated, but celebrated. Civil society is often at the forefront of promoting and advancing FoRB, and the organizations are their engines of the grassroots change. They advocate for FoRB in ways that resonate with local populations, tailoring their message to address specific cultural or religious contexts. Civil society is also instrumental in identifying and addressing early warning signs of religious discrimination or violence, helping prevent small-scale tensions from escalating into broader conflicts. In freedom of religion or belief landscape, there is also the parliamentarians, and their unique and powerful position. Parliamentarians can be the connectors, the bridges between governments and CSOs, those who shape the frameworks that safeguard FoRB, and also be the voice to advocate for FoRB in their own communities or abroad. MPs are the keepers of FoRB that scrutinize legislation to ensure that it does not infringe upon these fundamental freedoms. MPs are critical in promoting education and awareness about FoRB. Parliamentarians have a responsibility to hold governments accountable. You can ensure that your government are living up to their international commitments to protect FoRB when you're an MP, whether through national policies or international advocacy. This might include pressing for the release of individuals unjustly imprisoned for their beliefs or advocating for stronger protections for vulnerable religious communities. Finally, MPs can serve as a role by engaging in respectful dialogue with colleagues from different faiths, backgrounds, and by supporting diverse constituencies. It demonstrates the power of unity in diversity in action. At the heart of this conversation is the recognition that the promotion of FoRB, the prevention of the misuse of religion, and the building of social cohesion and resilience are shared responsibilities. Government, civil society, parliamentarians, and citizens also have a role to play. Our success depends on our ability to work together, to listen to one another, and to act in ways that foster mutual respect and understanding. The words require a transformative and humble leadership and change makers like you all in this room. In this spirit of cooperation, I urge you all to continue your admirable work in promoting FoRB as a cornerstone of peace and justice. The road ahead might be challenging, but it is a road that we must walk together. In promoting the freedom to believe, we promote the very fabric of our societies, ensuring that they remain resilient, cohesive, and just for generations to come. I wish us all a fruitful and meaningful conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fernanda. All right, next up we have a member of parliament from Panama, Jose Ramos. And I think Giselle Lima might help with translation.
Buenos días, queridos amigos. Agradezco a Gert Michael, Nadine, Maenza, Chris, Stewart y Wade Kusack y a los que han colaborado por la realización de este gran evento.
Good morning, dear friends. I would like to thank Greg Mitchell, Nadine Maenza, Chris Stewart, Wade Kusack, and everyone who contributed to make this great event possible.
Quiero iniciar con un mensaje. Absolutamente nadie funciona bien atado, arrastrando, empujando o con un peso en sus espaldas.
I want to start with a message. Absolutely no one functions well when they are tied down, dragged, pushed, or carrying weight on their shoulders.
Los derechos naturales no solamente son inalienables, es tu deber ejercerlos sin presiones, sin condiciones, a tu tiempo, sin importar su nacionalidad y dónde lo desarrolles.
Natural rights are not only inalienable, but it is also your duty to exercise them without pressure, without conditions, and in your own time, regardless of your nationality or where you develop them.
Hablando un poco de mi país, en Panamá la libertad de religión es total y la aprovechamos al máximo. A los creyentes, que somos el 96% de la población, nos gusta compartir lo que representa a Dios para nosotros y contagiar ese sentimiento en los demás. Evangelizar es un llamado que recibimos y muchos, sin importar los riesgos, lo realizamos. Y díganme ustedes, ¿quién no quiere cumplir con esta hermosa labor en libertad?
Speaking a little bit about my country, in Panama, freedom of religion is complete, and we take full advantage of it. As believers representing 96% of the population, we like to share what God means to us and spread that feeling to others. Evangelizing is a calling we receive, and many of us, despite the risk, carry it out. Tell me, who wouldn't want to fulfill this beautiful duty in freedom?
El poder llevar la palabra a los hospitales, a las cárceles, a los barrios marginales, contribuye con la formación religiosa, cultural y de buenas costumbres que forjan hombres y mujeres libres y respetuosos de su familia y de la persona, y con una visión clara de los derechos humanos. Esto permite la buena convivencia de todos los participantes de una nación.
Being able to bring the word of God to hospitals, prisons, and marginalized neighborhoods contributes to religious, cultural, and moral formation, which shapes free men and women who respect their families and fellow human beings with a clear vision of human rights. This enables peaceful coexistence among all members of a nation.
En Panamá y el resto de la región centroamericana representamos un importante porcentaje de creyentes y tenemos una gran variedad de religiones y creencias, algunas tan raras que nos sorprendería. Con excepción de Costa Rica, todos reconocen el Estado laico, pero no en todos los países centroamericanos lo hacemos sin mayores obstáculos.
In Panama and the rest of Central America, we represent a significant percentage of believers and have a wide variety of religions and beliefs, some so rare that they would surprise us. With the exception of Costa Rica, all countries recognize a secular state, but not all of them do so without significant obstacles.
En la medida de que cada persona participe sin restricciones y disfrute de su creencia, permitirá mantener la paz entre todos los actores de nuestra sociedad. Si en cada comunidad, si en cada ciudad logramos ese respeto por las creencias de los demás, tendremos una sociedad que avanza, un país que se desarrolla y una región que alcanza sus metas.
As each person participates without restrictions and enjoys their beliefs, it will help maintain peace among all members of our society. If in every community, if in every city, we achieve that respect for beliefs of others, we will have a society that progresses, a country that develops, and a region that achieves its goals.
Reafirmo, claro que es importante la libertad de religión o de creencias, porque de alguna manera la democracia de cualquier país se sustenta en el respeto a las decisiones que los ciudadanos tomen en relación a alguna religión, culto o creencia.
I reaffirm, of course, freedom of religion or belief is important, because in a way, the democracy of any country is based on respecting the decisions its citizens make regarding any religion, worship, or belief.
Lo contrario a esto significaría imposición y configura las dictaduras.
The opposite would mean imposition and would constitute dictatorship.
Desde mi vinculación al panel internacional de parlamentarios por la libertad de religión o creencias, he notado que la defensa de los derechos humanos abarca otros campos que hoy día se van complicando más. La libertad de religión y creencia ha retrocedido en Centroamérica.
Since joining the International Panel of Parliamentarians for Freedom of Religion or Belief, I have noticed that defending human rights encompasses other areas that are becoming increasingly complicated. Freedom of religion or belief has regressed in Central America.
En México, por ejemplo, que tiene culto hasta para la muerte, los permanentes e incontrolables conflictos entre narcotraficantes representan un gran problema para las reuniones, promoción y celebraciones religiosas que afectan su autonomía, sus expresiones culturales, tradiciones y la economía.
In Mexico, for example, where they have a cult even for death, the ongoing and uncontrollable conflicts between drug traffickers represent a major problem for religious gatherings, promotion, and celebrations, which affect autonomy, cultural expressions, traditions, and the economy.
En el caso de Nicaragua, la dictadura de Ortega Murillo viola todos los derechos humanos, pero ha sido muy consistente en la persecución a los cristianos, a los indígenas y sus creencias, a la sociedad civil, a las universidades, y a pesar de combatirla más que todo desde fuera, con la presión internacional, no ha logrado avances en los últimos 17 años. Con una estrategia bien dirigida y apoyo económico, ha utilizado los organismos de integración regional, llámese SICA y Parlacén, para incorporar a sus aliados, el año pasado a China y recién el mes pasado a Rusia, que tampoco son respetuosos de los derechos humanos y las libertades, mucho menos del derecho internacional. En mi país a estas componendas les llamamos dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres.
In Nicaragua, the Ortega Murillo dictatorship violates all human rights, but it has been particularly consistent in persecuting Christians, indigenous people and their beliefs, civil society, and universities. Despite efforts to combat it, mainly from outside through international pressure, no significant progress has been made in the last 17 years. With a well-directed strategy and financial support, the regime has used regional integration organizations such as SICA and Parlacén to incorporate its allies, last year China and just last month Russia, neither of which respect human rights, liberties, or international law. In my country, we have a saying for such alliance: tell me who you walk with and I'll tell you who you are.
Desde el punto de vista de la seguridad, es necesario fomentar el respeto por las creencias. Cuando la religión traspasa los límites de la parte espiritual bien concebida y llega hasta el fanatismo, puede alterar la estabilidad y seguridad en un estado o región. Es lo que ocurre en estos momentos con la guerra en Medio Oriente. Si revisamos el origen de la misma, encontramos radicalismos religiosos que se han unido a intereses geopolíticos que hasta el momento no permiten a los líderes tener una postura razonable y evitar la escalada de violencia que estamos viviendo.
From a security standpoint, fostering respect for beliefs is essential. When religion exceeds the limits of its well-conceived spiritual aspect and crosses into fanaticism, it can disrupt the stability and security of a state or region. This is what is happening now with the war in the Middle East. If we examine its origins, we will find religious radicalism intertwined with geopolitical interests, which have so far prevented leaders from adopting a reasonable stance and stopping the escalation of violence we are witnessing.
Tratar de imponer nuestra creencia provoca odio y una lucha permanente entre los ciudadanos, que debemos mantenernos juntos para echar adelante nuestro país. Un país seguro promueve estabilidad social en la familia, en la economía y en la educación.
Trying to impose our beliefs breeds hatred and creates constant conflict among citizens who should work together to move our country forward. A secure country promotes stability in society, in families, in the economy, and in education.
Podríamos pensar en que los beneficios sociales incluyen la paz, la tolerancia, el desarrollo, el trabajo, la educación, la estabilidad emocional y el amor. En el aspecto económico, una sociedad que logra mantener buenas relaciones sin ningún tipo de diferencias o irrespetos en cuanto a religión, podría estabilizar su economía, su desarrollo intelectual, tecnológico y de servicio.
We could consider that the social benefits include peace, tolerance, development, employment, education, emotional stability, and love. From an economic perspective, a society that managed to maintain good relations without any kind of differences or disrespect regarding religion could stabilize its economy, intellectual development, technology, and services.
La sociedad civil puede jugar un papel importante en el fortalecimiento del trabajo de las diferentes iglesias. Es un tema de solidaridad y subsidiariedad. Si lo están haciendo es bueno y beneficioso, y no lo voy a hacer yo, pues debo apoyarlo.
Civil society can play an important role in strengthening the work of different churches. It's a matter of solidarity and subsidiarity. If what they are doing is good and beneficial, and I am not doing it, then I should support them.
Con esto nuestro país podría alcanzar niveles insospechados si logramos mantener la paz entre los ciudadanos con diferentes creencias o con ninguna religión.
Our countries could achieve unimaginable levels if we manage to maintain peace among citizens with different beliefs or with no religion at all.
Si un Estado promueve las libertades y respeto en el ámbito religioso, se sobreentiende que hay democracia y es capaz de generar confianza para fomentar emprendimientos, las constantes actividades culturales y turísticas, entre otros con inversiones económicas temporales de corto y largo plazo que mueven directamente la economía local con un ingreso directo e importante al micro y gran empresario y en consecuencia dinamizar su propia economía.
If a state promotes freedoms and respect in the religious sphere, it implies that there is democracy, and it can generate confidence to encourage entrepreneurship, ongoing cultural and tourist activities, and other investments, both temporary and long-term, that directly stimulate the local economy, providing significant income to small and large businesses alike, thereby boosting the country's economy.
El lograr acuerdos básicos de convivencia y respeto traen como resultado sociedades más sanas, con esperanza, con futuro y con planes de desarrollo a largo plazo.
Achieving basic agreements on coexistence and respect results in healthier societies full of hope, with a future, and with long-term development plans.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Next, we have a member of parliament from Ghana. We have member Godfred Seidu Jasaw.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellencies, allow me to stand on existing protocols to just say how excited I am to be part of this family today, deliberating on freedom of religion and beliefs. I wish to associate with it by re-emphasizing the conceptual emphasis of the role of Parliament and parliamentarians. As you would know, to get the most impact, you need to work with the people. And that is what civil society organizations do. That is what NGOs do. But what seems to be forgotten and missing in the space is the role of Parliament as the people's representatives. Clearly, these are a group of people that sit in Parliament houses to make laws, but they don't just sit there. They get elected by the very people that are affected with these concepts that we are discussing here. So anything to build the capacity of Parliament, the role of Parliament, emphasizes the role of policy in driving change that we need in these enterprises. So for example, we have to proceed on a step of enlarging the conceptual understanding of the policy space. it's very clear that in most cases, policy is looked at and development partners, NGOs, civil societies, work with governments in state executive positions. But in most cases, the role of parliaments, the people's representatives, is actually missing in the whole conversation. And so I'm here to emphasize that we need to avert our minds to our dealings with state governments and so on, to know that it's important to emphasize the role of parliaments as well. And to get parliaments to give what we want, it may be plausible to consider, what do parliaments come with? What do parliamentarians come with? I think parliamentarians and parliaments come with information. Do they really have it? That is the question. Do they really have the capacity? And so in collaborations, I emphasize that there's a need, again, to avert our minds to what capacities parliaments require, so that if we are working with parliaments, we also need to incapacitate them to be able to appreciate the need for religious freedom, the need for interactions, the need for influencing policies of governments, the need to uphold the freedoms that people deserve in the various countries that these parliaments serve in. I'll give you an example. We in Ghana 2 years ago, and I wish I had you 2 years ago, because I work with the Sanneh Institute, incidentally, where Professor Azumah comes from, who will speak next after me. Professor Azumah represents the civil society organization, an institute of religious studies. That gave us a lot of capacity backing to push in Parliament a law that criminalized the accusation of witchcraft in my country. And here is a country where a lot of people died, women in particular, died, people that suffered from dementia and other related illnesses were molested, accused of witchcraft, and in most cases, they just die. And so, Professor Azumah and his institute brought in information to we as parliamentarians. So together with colleagues, sponsored a private members' bill that criminalized the accusation of witchcraft in Ghana. So I would want to say that this is a perfect example that many of us can consider in our various settings and see what is possible to collaborate between civil society organizations, development partners, and parliaments. If we do that, come with the information, come with the capacity, it's possible that we can ride on the influence of parliamentarians to be able to influence, build the resilience blocks, build the social cohesion, prevent the conflicts that we are talking about. Now, in Ghana, we don't have active religious conflicts because of most of the work that people like Sanneh Institute are doing. However, the red herrings are rearing its ugly head. For example, there is brutality of the state on mere demonstrators against Galamsey. Galamsey is small-scale mining in illegal places, destroying the environment, and so on. Now, there's a brute force by the police of the state to be able to make sure that these people don't get their freedom to demonstrate. It's also election year. 2 months down the line, there will be an election. So my point is that there are possible threats to the kind of freedom, expression of rights that we have enjoyed in the past. And so proactiveness will be a key cornerstone in ensuring that we start to build the ingredients and build a momentum that will prevent what we experience in other countries like the Middle East and so on. Proactivity is important by identifying the right ally to be able to forge concepts, to be able to forge the right steps on proactivity will be key. And I look forward to more discussions. I look forward to further collaborations with the community here. I'm excited again to be with you, and I look forward to opening more discussions with you all. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, he mentioned John Azumah, so let's bring up Professor John Azumah from the Sanneh Institute, also in Ghana.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Greg, and your wonderful team for the invitation, and I want to thank the Templeton Religion Trust and Chris and Dennis for all the work that you've done that has inspired and enabled our work in Ghana. As human beings, we acknowledge that we are created to live in community, and as such, we are endowed with rights and responsibilities for the purpose of not just sustaining life, but seeking the flourishing of our common humanity. By virtue of divine sovereignty, we live our lives as members of a religious community and as citizens of our nations. We conduct our affairs as subjects of the state. In Africa, we therefore see ourselves as believers and as citizens, as dual citizens of the two realities. Scripture enjoins us to honor our rulers and our fellow human beings without ceasing to serve and to fear God. In their different ways, divine sovereignty and the sovereignty of the nation state demand our allegiance without one being exclusive of the other. While not all citizens are believers, it is the case that all believers are citizens. And this dual status places on believers a dual obligation to uphold the rule of laws of government and to respect freedom of conscience and concerning obedience to God. We wish to emphasize the overlapping obligations of our dual citizenship by drawing attention to the two realities of divine sovereignty and the sovereignty of the nation state. As one subscribing to the Reformed tradition coming from an Islamic context, the sovereignty of God predominates my theological reflection and view of life. Within the economy of his own sovereignty, God endowed human beings with free will. Similarly, the sovereignty of the nation states requires it to respect and protect the freedom of conscience. Religious freedom is inseparable from issues of citizenship and government. Freedom of religion and freedom from religion are two sides of the same coin. There can be no one without the other. This is something that governments and religious leaders tend to forget and need to be reminded from time to time. In religion, freedom arises from the conscience of the believer, while in the nation state, freedom springs from the will and consent of citizens. We are obligated, therefore, to be guarantors of each other's freedom and to use our freedom to serve one another. We are especially obligated to protect the rights of the weak and the most vulnerable amongst us. In this case, minorities, and in our African context, women and children. We are deeply convinced that faith gives its noblest expression in settings where all are free to follow their religious convictions and freely to serve the common good. In our African context, with corrupt governments and weak state institutions, civil society is particularly obligated to remain vigilant in the protection of freedom of conscience. Both in the divine economy and that of the nation state, there can be no responsibility and accountability without free will and freedom of conscience. Our dual citizenship therefore recognizes the complementarity of our roles as believers and citizens, in which freedom becomes the ground for connection between the two. The challenge that civil society organizations like ours have in our context is what can we do beyond advocacy, research, and education when the duty bearers fail or refuse to formulate or to enforce relevant policies and instruments. My colleague from Ghana just mentioned an example of a collaboration between our institute and the Parliament of Ghana. We worked 3 years with Parliament of Ghana, and he was one of my partners for Parliament to pass this bill. and the president of the country has refused to sign the bill into law. What can we do as civil society? And that is the limit that we have been able to go to. We've done the research, we've provided the information, we've gotten Parliament to act, and the president says, I will not sign the bill. What is civil society supposed to do? A second incident is when students in schools were discriminated. Muslim girls were discriminated from wearing the hijab, the head covering, and from observing the Ramadan. And governments were asked to formulate policies to prevent these restrictions from occurring. As I speak, government has not done that. Our institute is doing research, and we can tell that a lot of the restrictions continue in the schools. What can we do as civil society when the duty bearers simply fail or refuse to enforce and implement policies? I hope to get the answers from you before I go back to Ghana. Thank you very much.
Great, and I think we have, thanks, John. And I think, so we just did an event in Ghana recently, back in May. And I think when we John wants to set up a religious freedom roundtable there. So perhaps, that can help. Giselle also set one up in Panama. Robert leads a regular roundtable that's government, but also civil society in Central Europe. So, everybody's working on these issues in their regions. I think we have Professor Uriel Simonsohn. Is he on Zoom? There he is. Can you hear us, Professor Simonsohn?
I can hear you. I'm wondering whether I could share a PowerPoint presentation.
I believe so. Let's see. Kaylee's going to be working with you to set that up. Professor Simonsohn is with Haifa University in Israel and director of the Haifa Laboratory for Religious Studies. All right, we can see the PowerPoint, Professor Simonsohn.
Okay, excellent. So first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this very important event, and I also would like to apologize for not attending in person. I assume most of you are following the news and can understand that it's not a time to travel outside my country. So my apologies again. I would like to share with you today, and I believe some of the things that we're currently doing at a time of war in Israel. And I believe that by doing that, I will be able to address some of the issues that were presented earlier in the opening session. So the 7th of October obviously had a very large impact on Israeli society. For many, it meant the resurrection of trauma. Israeli society, irrespective of one's affiliation, religious, ethnic, etc., is a society that I defined a society in trauma. For the Jews, it meant the resurrection of a sense of victimhood that goes back in history, and that brought many liberals to be, quote unquote, disillusioned from the prospects of peace. For the hardliners, I mean those who were traditionally opposed to any kind of resolution, or at least one that would entail some kind of compromise, that was the kind of position that enforced their "I told you so" kind of statement. This later on generated a lot of Jewish suspicion, anger, and hate towards their Arab neighbors. And in response, among the Arabs, you could sense a lot of fear, perplexity, and even a sense of shame, because they totally were not identified with the acts that were committed on the 7th of October. So for many, what happened on the 7th of October and the aftermath was a blow to hopes for peace and shared society ideals. And that also triggered a huge potential for clashes within Israel. Now, thinking of the 7th of October, we should also recall memories from May 2021, during another time of violent escalations between Israel and Gaza. Maybe some of you recall during that month back in 21, there were outbursts of violence and clashes between Jews and Arabs in several mixed cities. When I say mixed cities, I'm referring to a group of some 10 cities in Israel where there's a relatively large presence of non-Jewish population, because for the most part, Jews and Arabs do not share the same urban or settlement centers. But there are 10 cities in Israel where they do, and during May 21, there were outbursts of violence between Jews and Arabs in those cities, which are very sensitive, of course. Cities like Lod, Ramle, Acres, Haifa, and Jaffa saw some of the worst violence. Synagogues and businesses were burned, and Jewish and Arab mobs battled in the streets. Over 1,000 people were arrested within several days. As a result, there was a very large concern following the October 7th events that kind of fire will start entering our mixed cities within Israel. And to that end, the center that I lead, which we call the Haifa Laboratory for Religious Studies, assembled a select group of religious leaders from Haifa, Jews hailing from the Haredi and Zionist Orthodox and Reform communities, Muslims from the mainstream Sunni congregations, as well as the Ahmadis, Christians from the Maronite, Greek Orthodox, Catholic, Armenian communities, and Druze. We made sure also that we could achieve a relative balance between the genders involved, and make sure that we have a notable female presence in the group. This group of some 20 leaders met for a series of 6 meetings on campus at the University of Haifa. I should note also that we made sure that each one of them, it was important for us to ascertain, had a community behind her or him. So these were not just people representing themselves, they were also representing their communities. And they met for a series of 6 meetings on campus for 2.5 hours every time, initially getting to know each other, sharing texts, exchanging information about their communities, and gradually moving into discussing case studies of real-life situations where conflict arises and how they propose to address those conflicts. And as they were discussing these case studies, they realized that they could work to prevent violence much more effectively if working together. And once that understanding began trickling down, they were able to come out with a public declaration of solidarity and unity within the city of Haifa, and mutual respect, of course, and also that facilitated their planning ahead for the future. Later on, the city of Haifa, it was important for us to transfer this group into the municipal administration of Haifa, and at that point, the group started meeting at the city hall. Right now, the group continues to meet on a monthly basis, first of all, in order to enhance existing ties. Secondly, also to bring in others, and so broaden the circle, so to speak. And focusing on countering lack of knowledge, ignorance, and suspicion within their communities, and also working to create an emergency task force. Basically, we're looking now at phase B of this group's work, where they're moving from work inward to work outwards, starting to affect their respective communities through the educational system, through joint communal activities, and through collaborations with formal bodies such as the municipality, police, social services, etc. Following the success in Haifa, We're now moving, we've already created a new group in Ramla, which you can spot on the southern part of this map. And this group has already been formed. We'll start meeting in a few weeks' time. And another group is about to be formed in Acres, which is up in the north. On the long term, our vision is to set up a forum in every city where there's a Jewish-Arab friction. This is basically, I think, a practical way to implement some of the ideals and values that you've all discussed. And I think this could also work as a model, not just within Israel, but perhaps outside it. And I would say that the key word for everything, if I had to choose a single word that would kind of sum everything up in a very, very precise way, that word would be trust. It starts and ends with trust. And it's a one-on-one basis trust that needs to be established initially, and it's a intercommunal trust that needs to be aspired to down the road. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. That's a good practical model for the world. I mean, I can see how you're building the social fabric there in Israel, social cohesion, which is what our program is all about. So thank you very much. Next, we're going to turn to someone who's done a lot of great work in the Middle East and beyond on building inclusive citizenship. So I'm very honored to bring up Sheikh Al Mahfoud bin Baya from the Alliance of Virtue and the Abu Dhabi Forum for Peace.
Good morning, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I'm not going to speak for long. It's maybe 2 hours. And usually I don't get a chance to speak. And today, I would love to thank the convener of this conference. They are IRF Secretary, and Love Your Neighbors Committee, and Templeton Religion Trust, and the sponsor who made this possible. And I would love to thank my friend. Thank you for your promise to do this, and thank you for your continue with the challenges I have and that you have to make it. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be articulated in English like my friends, because when I landed in 1999 in California, I was thinking California it's a city and San Francisco is a state. So then I find out it's not. I'm landing in San Francisco, it's the city, and California is a state. So there's my journey with the hope. And imagine landing in Silicon Valley in 1999, and July 1999, and you find all people talking about the Y2K is the end of life. And then the only thing is keep me, I'm a prisoner of hope on God and hope of better future. So I find everybody around me trying to go to a safe place, especially in Middle East when this, they want to go to peace lands to spend their last moment, and they have to stay in Silicon Valley that moment. So the only thing make me stay is the hope. And here I'm standing again here in hope after 25 years for a better future. A few days ago when my son was going to school, I was putting him in the bed and I said, maybe nuclear weapon will happen. And maybe we'll face big challenges as human beings. So I know him, he liked to escape from school. He looked at me back and he said, why I have to go to school tomorrow? I said, the same question I had in 1999. It's just the hope. So we're going to be always prisoners of hope. So, in this moment, And every time you travel to a new country, you want to learn something. I was lucky in 1994 when I came to France. The first thing my teacher he gave me to learn French from it's I love poetry. So and that poetry make me love France and love Europe all these years. It was l'amour est grand comme l'océan, il est monti ce qu'on dit que l'on vécu. Juste un moment, ce n'est pas vrai, c'est que tu comprends le verbe aimer, c'est à la fois le goût de joie et la folie. It's beautiful. So that's the first thing I learned. But when I went to America, the first thing I learned, death be not proud. So I bravely. So it's good to have love before you become a brave. On the first anniversary of the start of the bloodshed of innocent children, women, and civilians, all this pain is the result of extremism. The extremism of terrorist movement and extremist governments. The United Nations says that more than 41,000 Palestinians has been killed, most of them women and children. We grieve with their families, and we pray for them. We pray for the survivors and demand immediate ceasefire to avoid further killing. Of course, this week marks the first anniversary of the killing of 1,200 innocent Jews in Israel. We grieve with their family, and we pray for the safe return for the hostages. So we pray for all. We condemn every act or hatred, aggressive, and killing in the name of religion. And we promise you that we will continue to fight those who hijack our religion and cause the gap between members of our Abrahamic family and human family. And we did. We ask nothing more than you than to deny the continued spreading of hatred and bloodshed by some of your followers. We need to hear your condemnation of that is happening now and your warning of that might happen tomorrow. And you remind that peace is good for all and that the earth is large enough for all. So I'm going to skip some to make it short. Today we are discussing one of the most important topics, and many minorities in some regions are still expressing tragedy due to religion persecution and society intolerance of pluralism. So diversity and different dispute, the clear and correct religion teaching that encouraging goodness, love for everybody. We've been working with everybody here, as you know, Marrakech Declaration, to make it as a statement from the majority Muslim scholars to protect the non-Muslim minority in Muslim world. We're working hard to include Marrakech Declaration to every constitution, and we're looking forward to more work. The United Arab Emirates has set a model for building a society of tolerance and happy coexistence through legal system that protect this positive diversity. The issue of religion freedom is almost one of the most important elements of the global freedom. And of course, United Nations Declaration for Human Rights, it's very clear and everybody tried. The United Arab Emirates adopted peace and the values of fixing civilization vision for this next 50 years. Abu Dhabi Forum Peace is one of the founding partners, an international alliance to promote religion freedom, and particularly in the ministerial summit since its the first day. I announced two important news. We will celebrate the 10th anniversary of the historical Marrakesh Declaration in January 2026, and we will announce the establishment of the first observatory for minority rights in the Islamic world, so that it will be held and will be headquartered in Marrakesh to prepare annual report and monitor the implementation for Marrakesh Declaration. With war being waged on peace all around, my dad, Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayyah, message provides a simple yet profoundly effective wage war on war. So we hope the upcoming will be peace on peace. For war is the path, is not the path, is not the way, peace is the path, and the path is a peace. Religion and freedom are the base tool for the world we dream of, and we wake up every day to work for. For your mission has no retirement, but it's from cradle to the grave. Peace be upon you. Thank you so much.
All right, with that, give one more round of applause for all of our distinguished leaders. Thank you all very much. All right, next up, we're going to get into the details now as a setup to the panel discussions on FoRB and security and the need to build social cohesion and resilience. To frame the conversations ahead, we have Dr. Chris Seiple and Dennis Hoover, who are senior fellows with Love Your Neighbor community, and they've been working together a lot on framing and discussing freedom of religion and security. So with that, we'll start with Dr. Chris Seiple.
Good morning. Good morning, Chris. Good to see you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, good. Thank you very much for that previous panel. And the summary is trust, and then my friend Sheikhna's word, prisoners of hope, which are from the prophet Zechariah. We are all prisoners of hope. And that's what keeps us coming back, and we have an obligation before God, or whatever our moral framework is, to work on these things together. And that was a beautiful summary with a practical example from not just Haifa, but Ghana. My name is Chris Seiple, and thank you for wishing me a good morning. This is Dr. Dennis Hoover. We've been working together on these issues of religion, religious freedom, security for over 20 years. Our first time that we did something together on this issue was in May of 2003. We did a conference on religious freedom, the missing dimension of security. And that became a book which Dennis is going to cite later. Speaking of books, if we could go to the next slide. This is the picture on a book that we did on religion and security in 2012. I took this picture, it's at the Khyber Pass between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it represents the paradox. We need a military to protect society, protect the state from extremism and from violence. At the same time, this contradiction exists. The military can ensure safety, but it can't ensure security. In the conflicts that we face, particularly with regard to religion, you cannot kill your way to victory. There's no way to kill your way to victory. In fact, a true security is one that is sustainable because there is mutual dependence of all citizens, no matter their moral framework, dependent upon each other. And that's another word that I want to throw into the mix with Greg's introduction, which was fantastic of our terms of reference, but mutual dependence. That is where security comes from, no matter our religion or our ethnicity. If we could go, well, not yet, sorry, go back to there. So we're going to give you a question and make an argument about what we're doing today. Our question is this: what is the story or food, and I'll explain that in a minute, what is the story from your past, from your cultural context, that helps you walk into the future? What is the path? What story or food can strengthen the path that you're on or put your country and your culture on a different path that is one of social cohesion and inclusive citizenship? We're going to share our story in a minute, but I want you to think about what your story is as it relates to your citizens and your people, so you can convince the President of Ghana to do the right thing, or whatever the case might be. What is it that works from your context? Because if you believe this, that our future runs through our past, then we have to think about what is the best of our past that defeats the worst of our past in order to have a better future for all of us. So that's our question. What's the story or the food that enables the future? And here's our argument. Protecting and promoting religious freedom, freedom of religion or belief, is not only the right thing to do according to your moral framework, it is in your self-interest to do so. For where people are free to practice the beliefs of their conscience, those people are not only less likely to rebel against the state, they are more likely to practice their faith and contribute to the well-being of all citizens, therefore enhancing the stability and social cohesion of the state in a shared society. If we go to the next slide. Now, I make these comments very cognizant of where we are in Europe, but in particular in Germany. We are acutely aware that extremism can take many forms. In our present times, we tend to think of, at least in my country, extremism as an Islamist thing. But extremism exists in all faiths and traditions. I studied in Poland as a student, and that is when I became aware of the extremisms from the left and the right that Europe produced. What you see on the left here is a communist extremism. When the communists came in to Poland, they gathered up all of the civil society leaders, all the military leaders, and they murdered them in the woods of Katyn. That's the order from Stalin in Russia to round them up. Then they blamed the Germans for it. Why did they do that? Because they knew about the forthcoming communist occupation and Russian colonialism. And they knew that these men and women would be a threat to that. So they killed them. Russia, a Christian majority country. Extremism. That's the left side from communism, but we also have the right side from fascism. And this is a picture of Jewish life coming back into being after 800 years of Jewish culture wiped out in 5 years by the Nazis. And by the way, I'm not showing you pictures of where they were murdered. Too often we show pictures of where they were murdered, and it needs to be a somber reflection, but we need to remember the best of who they were and what they contributed to the well-being of Poland and the well-being of both of them to the well-being of Poland. We have to think about the best of who they were, even as we remember that they were killed and murdered by the left and right extremism generated by communism and fascism. We go to the next slide. But Europe also gives us hope, and I want to walk you through these pictures. This picture on the left, our good friend Ambassador Robert Rehak showed us at Czernin Palace in Prague in November of last year. This is the window where Jan Masaryk, who was the foreign minister of Czechoslovakia at the time, he fell from this window on March 10th, 1948, 10 days after the communists came to power. His sin, he wanted to participate in the Marshall Plan because he believed in helping his people. The KGB came for him, and people believed they were knocking at the door. He was trying to escape out his bathroom window, and he fell to his death. But Europe chose a different path in 1989. This is yours truly, outside, on November 18th, 1989. And Europe chose a different path. They remembered the best of their past and moved toward the future. They moved toward the future. And on the right, you see Chernin Palace in Prague, the home of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And over that palace, along with the Czech flag, is the NATO flag, the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization that protects the freedoms that we're talking about today. Alliances endure because of shared values, and the foremost value is freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of belief. Because the extremism of the previous slide, from the left and the right, the communist and the fascist, it doesn't go away. You have to preserve it from generation to protect against those extremisms. Otherwise, they will be back, and if you have been following elections here in Germany, you know that they are back in some form. Next slide, please. So, the Prague model, you have heard reference to this. It is many things, but mostly it is the top-down of government working with the bottom-up of civil society to include religious leaders and to include philanthropy. This is under the vision and leadership of Ambassador Rehak when he gathered us in Prague in November. And you see lots of pictures of us smiling and working together. This is a serious topic. Don't get me wrong. But if we want to encourage mutual dependency and relationship and trust and prisoners of hope in our own countries, we have to be that as well. That's why we're here most of all. You, when you have coffee breaks and when you have dinners and you sit next to somebody you don't know, we have to be in relationship with each other if we are to preach this model to the rest of the world. And this is what happened in Prague. And in particular, Sanneh in Prague, Sanneh's up there on the right, he asked us a fundamental question. He said, this is fantastic, but where are the majority world voices? We need to expand this. You just can't talk about it in the West. You have to include the rest, where the majority of the people live. So that's how this conference came about. To have the majority of the people hear from the majority world. To listen and learn from your stories as you listen and learn from each other as mutual dependency is developed, trust results, and we continue on as prisoners of hope. Next slide, please. So I want to share with you our story, Dennis and I. Dennis and I share many things. We worked for an organization in Virginia, which has a lot of religious freedom tradition in our country. We're both from Pennsylvania. He was born there. But he lives in New England now, and New England is where I grew up, in the state of Massachusetts and then the state of Rhode Island. And this guy, his name is Roger Williams. He came from the Old England to a place that is now known as the New England, which is the northeast region of my country, where Dennis and I are from. And they left the Old England because they were persecuted for their faith. But they were still human and behaved according to the human condition. And when they came to the New England, they did unto others as was done unto them. The majority culture in England persecuted them as a minority. They come to the New England in America. Now they're the majority, and guess what? If you don't believe like they do, you're in trouble. So this guy, Roger Williams, who was from the majority, it is always the responsibility of the majority ethno-religious culture to include the minority as a function of the very best of their beliefs and moral frameworks. He said, we can't do this. He said, forced worship stinks in the nostrils of God. And he went west, and he created the state or colony then of Rhode Island. He spoke the language of the people. He paid them for the land. He treated women equally. and he bought the land. Something you don't hear about in our history too much. Next slide, please. And then later again in 1663, there was another colonial charter from Rhode Island, and he specifically and explicitly linked religious freedom with security. Translation, if men and women are free to exercise their conscience, they are less likely to rebel against the state. They will be more loyal to the state that allows them to practice the essence of their identity. Time and again, we see the majority culture scapegoat the minority to maintain their political power. That's the wrong approach. Or they practice a policy of assimilation. All minorities have to look like and act like the majority culture. Roger Williams is saying no to assimilation. He's saying yes to integration. Bring your identity to the table. The purpose of government is to provide the table and make sure everybody gets a seat. And then you bring your values to the table. Religious freedom is not just about the free practice. It's also being allowed to bring your religious values to the policy table, to the public policy table. As a Christian, as a Muslim, etc., I believe this for the best of all of our citizens. Next slide, please. So, I talked about food. I did my dissertation on Uzbekistan, and we have a delegation from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. I love them both equally. But they all love pilaf the best. And pilaf is a wonderful example of how we should think about this. You have all these separate ingredients, separate beliefs. The essence of these ingredients and these beliefs are wonderful. But when you bring them together, you don't melt them into a melting pot like we say in America. That's a terrible analogy. You bring them together where they maintain the essence of their belief, and they are better and stronger and more flavorful together. This is what we're trying to do. So I encourage you, as I invite Dennis to come to the podium here, I encourage you to think about what is your story from history. Who is the person in your past that tells the best of your past in order to seize the best of your future? And what is the best food that you have that illustrates this example as we work together, mutually dependent prisoners of hope? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everyone. As Chris mentioned, the thesis that we're putting forward as a point of departure for this conference is a very simple argument. Freedom of religion or belief is in a society's practical self-interest. More specifically, inclusive religious freedom is an essential precondition for a society to develop social cohesion, resiliency, stability, and sustainable security. Next slide, please. Chris and I have been preaching this message for the linkage between, the positive linkage between security and religious freedom for many years, as Chris mentioned. Our first project together, first book project, was a book called Religion and Security, the New Nexus in International Relations, which built on a previous national conference. When the book first came out, conventional thinking in security circles had been shaped by the trauma of 9/11 and also by the thinking of Harvard political scientist Samuel Huntington, who ominously predicted a coming clash of civilizations. So zero-sum thinking was very prevalent about the relationship between religious freedom and security, which went something like this. If a religion is the source of your security problem, then repressing religion will help solve your security problem. Our contrarian argument was then and remains today a positive-sum argument in which religious liberty and sustainable security are two sides of the same coin. Repressing religion in the name of security only makes security risks worse in the long run, while inclusive religious freedom, on the other hand, helps build sustainable security. Next slide. Chris and I have developed this argument further in several subsequent publications, including in a chapter for Alan Hertzky's book, The Future of Religious Liberty. And there we describe the interrelationship between religious freedom and security in terms of two contrasting cycles or feedback loops, a negative one and a positive one. In the negative cycle, restrictions on freedom of religion or belief lead to social tensions and conflict, which in turn lead to even tighter restrictions on religion, which in turn exacerbate the social tensions still further, and on in a negative feedback loop. And I think there are three key dynamics that help explain this feedback loop, why violations of FoRB, even when done in the name of security, can actually undermine security in the long run. First, repressing religion can exacerbate conflict between religious groups themselves. Strict control or repression of religion tends to segregate the population, which can increase tension between religious groups and lead to interreligious violence. Under religious repression, an opaque, rumor-based atmosphere often emerges that poisons society, undermines interpersonal and community relationships, and when there's no trust between faith communities, they tend to build rigid walls between themselves and hunker down in a defensive posture, leading eventually to a greater likelihood of conflict between them. Second, government repression and discrimination that is intended to weaken or pacify a religious group often completely backfires, which is to say, over time, the group just becomes stronger and becomes radicalized against the state. Over time, a victimized religious minority can become so embittered and aggrieved that they are driven to militancy. They sacralize the conflict and their victimhood and sometimes turn to extreme means of resistance, including terrorism. Repression can breed an apocalyptic speculation, a cult of blood and martyrdom amongst the persecuted. Complicating this radicalization dynamic still further is that some members of the persecuted group will flee the country and then proceed to support violent resistance from diaspora. Third, a dimension of the security dynamic that is too often overlooked is that government favoritism of the majority faith is often also part of the problem. Such favoritism contributes to some members of the majority faith becoming radicalized and violent. Sometimes that violence is directed at religious minorities, but other times it's directed at the state itself, even though the state is already favoring the majority faith. Why? Because once the radicalization dynamic sets in, the state can never be pure enough, right? No matter what the state does to appease religious radicals, there's always critics calling for more. In the literature, this is referred to as religious outbidding. In other words, radicals can always outbid the state in a race to theocracy. Government favoritism breeds feelings of entitlement, habits of scapegoating minorities, and an environment of impunity that emboldens radicals to commit acts of vigilante violence. Scholars of terrorism have documented this empirically, that government favoritism of a majority faith is a predictor of majoritarian terrorism, meaning terrorism carried out by members of the majority faith. So that's the bad news. Next cycle. There's a positive cycle that we can talk about, that sustainable religious freedom and sustainable security, two sides of the same coin. So I'll conclude by briefly pointing out the dynamics underlying this positive cycle or virtuous feedback loop. First, when a state protects FoRB, it fosters feelings of gratitude and loyalty to the state, sentiments that support a healthy sort of patriotism. This is because religious identity and values are not trivial matters, not like mere aesthetic preferences or consumer choices. The individual's religious conscience is basic to human nature, so a state that respects this simple reality will earn the affections of its citizens. Second, a sustainable environment of religious freedom fosters trust, mutual understanding, and collaboration between different religious communities. When all religious communities feel that they can live out their beliefs and their traditions, that their presence in society is not merely tolerated in a tentative or grudging way, but genuinely respected, they'll feel confident in developing multi-faith friendship networks, cross-cultural religious literacy, and lines of communication and collaboration with other religious groups. Multi-faith networks of trust and solidarity also build resiliency in society in times of crisis. Instead of pointing fingers at each other and developing conspiracy theories, when a crisis hits, religious groups rally to each other's aid and defense. Finally, a sustainable environment of religious freedom yields many practical benefits for society and the economy. In an environment of freedom and fairness for all, religious groups feel empowered and liberated to contribute to their societies in innumerable ways. Again, research has documented that under the right conditions, religion has a positive influence on volunteerism, charitable giving, education, social services, civic leadership skills, and the bottom line, economic productivity and growth. Next slide. So I'll end on this last point about economic benefits, circling back to an element of my story. As Chris mentioned, I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, which, like Rhode Island, was a 17th century pioneer of religious freedom, founded by the Quaker William Penn. One of the results of Pennsylvania's early embrace of religious freedom is that it is home to large communities of Amish and Mennonites. And although these groups, as you probably know, are famous for their pacifism and their rejection of many aspects of modern culture, they also have a tremendously strong work ethic and are highly skilled farmers and tradesmen. Indeed, economic studies of Pennsylvania have documented that their economic productivity and work ethic produces not just profits for their own farms, but they lift the overall economy of the state of Pennsylvania. So this is a good slide to end on because it's a reminder to Chris's charge at the beginning that for each of us to think about our own stories, our own foods, so to speak, and to identify and celebrate those aspects that, that support social flourishing and tolerance and cooperation. It's also a good slide to end on because it's time for a break. And I'm not sure that we're going to be able to offer giant soft pretzels to you, but at least we do have coffee on hand. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Chris and Dennis. All right, we'll break for coffee. Let's do 20 minutes and be back at 11:25.